Hello there, everyone. I'm Kurtz.
And I'm Run Bam Run Faster.
But that's a little long, so I just call him Bam.
And this week we'll follow through on that magic trick I promised you by making Bastion about something completely different.
We're still waffling between Lit Show and Magic Show.
Magic waffles.
This is actually a pretty good exercise for anyone uninitiated to the discipline, though. Getting introduced to the idea that a given work can have multiple, equally valid readings.
There's a thing we like to say in literature. There's no such thing as a wrong answer. There are well-supported answers and poorly supported answers. Unless your answer disagrees with mine, then you're just wrong, you incredible cretin.
Cretin. If you're going to insult the analysis, at least pronounce it right.
In any case, today we'll be looking at something a little more under the surface today. A theme which doesn't really get touched on as directly, but is almost constantly presented and played with throughout the entire game. Grief.
Cue the Charlie Brown puns.
To start our conversation on grief, let's return briefly to the work itself, which takes place just after the apocalypse. Lots of grief to be had here, because everyone is dead.
The apocalypse here is also known as the Calamity.
So it's a game that pretty early on focuses on death and destruction. All told, Bastion is actually a pretty darkly themed game, which is not betrayed at all by how incredibly vibrant and gorgeous it is.
Like putting a pretty dress on a terminal patient.
Speaking of narrative, however, the bulk of this grief gets focused through our small cast of characters, each of the 3 NPC characters having suffered some great loss in their life, often before the calamity ever happened.
And each of these characters has their own method of dealing with their own grief. Each of those methods getting worked through individually by the player character, the kid, and ultimately by the player as they guide the kid through his own grief.
Of these 3 avatars of grief, we're going to start with Rucks. He's the first character that both the kid and the player meet. He's our narrator, and his voice is basically the best feature of the entire game.
As the narrator, we essentially see Caelondia through Rux's eyes, and Rucks sees Caelondia through the world's best rose-tinted glasses.
Being a handy guy like he is, he probably invented the glasses himself.
Before the Calamity, Rucks was an inventor and an architect. He spent most of his life creating Caelondia and its many features, including the rippling wall, which, we don't really know how big it was, but
years of work undone in an instant.
Pretty big.
The Calamity took all of that away from him. Rux's grief is the loss of Caelondia itself, and just like he spent his life before creating it, he spent much of his life after trying to recreate it for us through his narration.
We spent a good chunk of the last episode talking about how Rucks was wrong, and he cut out all the bad parts of Caelondia.
We sort of made him out to be a pretty colossal jerk.
Truthfully, his stilted recollection of Caelondia isn't really fabricated to make it look better, as much as it is an ideal recreation of the city he invested so much of his life to help build. This is how he deals with his grief, by reconstructing how it was, or at least how he remembers it.
Of all 3 of our avatars, Rucks is probably the most relatable. Anyone who's gone through some sort of major loss has likely done this to some extent, something as simple as leaving a coat on the rack, or as elaborate as leaving a bedroom exactly how someone left it before their big retirement party in the sky.
The game threads this theme around Rucks almost every chance it gets. There's the city crest, an item which not only is a symbol of mass production, remaking over and over, but also which literally rebuilds pieces of Caelondia for the kid to traverse.
Then there's his personal item, a set of history books that leads to his Who Knows Where stage, which takes place as a Bastion-themed alphabet rather than his personal history, an act of memorization.
H is for Hensa, goddess of pain and pleasure. You can't have one without the other. The veiled widow makes sure of it.
He's the designer and sole maintainer of the Bastion, a place of perseverance, which takes on more and more of the old world as the story progresses.
Then there's also the fact that his master plan for fixing the Calamity is to literally turn back time to before it happened. So, he's got a hard time letting go is what we're saying.
And while the game doesn't make any overt judgments, that does seem to be the conclusion it draws, that while not necessarily wrong, Rucks isn't likely to ever move on.
He actually admits that he has no idea if going back in time will prevent another Calamity, or even how many times it's been done before. Though, to be fair, neither do we. We're game scholars, not theoretical physicists.
Still, his desire to make things exactly how they were is so great, he's willing to take that chance, even if it means ultimately making the same mistakes.
I'm sure it's no problem. It only took Bill Murray 3,176 retries to figure it out himself. Rucks should be no time at all.
Again, while there's no black and white judgments, Bastion seems to hint at the answer to the question of how many times as being a lot.
Rucks is constantly suffering deja vu, including the one repeated line,
Maybe I'll see it in the next one. I'll see you in the next one.
This entire concept is perhaps best encapsulated in one of Rux's random barks when exiting the armory.
It wasn't fixed. It was unbroken.
Rucks isn't so interested in fixing the calamity, as much as he is in unbreaking Caelondia, even if that means repeating all the mistakes that got him there in the first place.
Rucks is willing to doom Caelondia to the destruction ad infinitum in order to salve his own grief. In almost a directly opposing movement, Zulf salves his own grief with the destruction itself.
When we find him, that destructive coping mechanism is turned inwards. It's explicitly stated that he was contemplating suicide, though the design itself already implies that pretty nicely.
We meet Zulf in the Hanging Gardens, very recently a statue garden decorated with the ashen forms of the former Caelondians who occupied it. That's cheery. Zulf stands so dead still that he could very well be one of them.
Once he discovers it was the Caelondians who engineered the calamity as some sort of crazy, mutually assured destruction apocalypse gun.
After he gains this focus, his depression becomes rage and destruction of the Bastion and all the sails.
The eponym for people from Caelondia, because that's never actually explained anywhere in the game.
Becomes his only focus, even at the cost of the scarce little he and anyone around him have left.
Much like Rucks, Zulf has themes of this threaded throughout. Similar to the Caelondian crest, Zulf identifies with the Ura crest, a shovel which is uniquely designed for a particular kind of destruction.
Want to dig up a stump and destroy it? Grab a shovel. Need to destroy a flat piece of ground? Grab a shovel. Need to destroy a wall protecting your enemies? Grab a bunch of shovels, hand them to some peasants, and tell them to get at it.
I dig my hole, you build a wall.
Oh hey, look at that.
It's also noteworthy that Zulf's personal item, though not the item that leads to his who-knows-where stage, is his pipe. A device designed explicitly to comfort through one's own destruction, small and manageable as it might be.
Finally, of all the characters, it is Zulf who shows the most reverence to Pith, the god of order and commotion, sometimes referred to as destruction. His image, literally a raging bull.
Bastion still doesn't make Zulf out to be the bad guy exactly, but it doesn't exactly sing his praises either. There's an acknowledgement of it and what comes of it, but without any hard value judgment.
In the same way that Rucks fills in the background with his obsession over reconstruction, Zulf's obsession with destruction moves the story forward, though not exactly in the most ideal of ways.
He undoes nearly all of the player's work by lashing out at the Bastion itself once he discovers the true nature of the calamity, and subsequently directs an entire Ura war party there to finish the job.
When this turns out less than successful, we next see him being beaten to the ground by his own people for leading the kids straight to them and unleashing unholy death upon them all.
His own destructive tendencies have literally turned back on him, and now he's reaping the benefits of unhealed destruction.
Zulf pretty much just constantly has bad days.
Which brings us to Zia, the queen of making bad days better.
While Zulf takes the lemons life gives him and throws them at people, Zia grabs some booze from the distillery and makes screwdrivers.
Bam, screwdrivers are made with orange juice.
Well, Zia would make them anyway because her entire shtick is making new from the less than ideal.
Now you're just reaching. Zia is, in a way, a synthesis of Rucks and Zulf, in that she takes what was given to her, but alters its form into something new.
When we first encounter Zia, it's while she's humming the song Dig That Hole, an Ura war anthem about toppling the rippling wall. Zia, however, turns it into something serene and comforting, unrecognizable from its previous form. A war cry into a lullaby.
Zia, as mentioned last episode, is an Ura raised in Caelondia, and so grew up with both cultures weighing heavily on her.
Rather than be crushed by these forces like a grape underfoot, she's shaped by these influences into a synthesis of the two, feeling both her connection to the Ura roots and identifying strongly with Caelondia.
Zia's tragedy stems from this mix, after she's betrayed by someone she thought she could share this cultural amalgamation with. Just like she makes something new from her Ura roots. Her personal item, the stockpot, takes many and sundry ingredients, alters their form, and creates a new product.
Sundry?
Yes, sundry.
Whatever. If it seems like we're reaching, then there's a reason for that. Unlike the previous two characters, Zia is less steeped in static symbols of the past, such as sigils or personal items, but rather by her actions post-calamity.
Zia, when the player encounters her, has set up a new life for herself amongst the rubble. and when brought to the Bastion, immediately adapts that mentality by adopting the animals the kid brings on board.
Of all three methods of dealing with grief, Bastion seems most forgiving towards this method, building Zia up as the least damaged person post-calamity. This isn't to say it's a perfect solution. The game also acknowledges the possibility for hit-or-miss outcomes when Zia's first crack at it blew up the world.
Which brings us to the kid. We know we've been waiting to get here as long as you have.
Try writing it out. It's terrible. It took us 6 pages, single space to get here.
The very first thing to notice about the kid is that he is a Ceylondian, the same as Rucks. They are probably the last Ceylondians left, giving a very clear relationship between the two.
Despite Rucks being the one who identifies most strongly with the city crest, it is the kid who possesses it, and likewise the kid who uses its powers to reconstruct parts of the city. Every building the kid creates in the Bastion is a copy of something from the city itself.
Every weapon the kid picks up is a piece of Ceylondian culture, a symbol of the past, that Rucks is more than happy to expound upon. Like Zulf, however, as much time as he spends recreating, he is also destroying.
Destroying the inhabitants of the levels, destroying the architecture, destroying representations of Pith, destroying Weeping Nelly, and often taking the cores, destroying the levels themselves. As heroes go, your property damage is right up there with most Superman fights.
Zulf's pipe and the kid's bed are swapped, each using the others to access their who-knows-where stage. Add to this the deep emotional gravity with which Zulf is introduced, and it becomes clear that the game wishes you to identify with him as much as Rucks.
And all of this is beautifully focused through the first weapon in the game, the Sailhammer. The usage of this item as a symbol almost deserves an episode unto itself, but Kurtz said hammers were way overdone.
The hammer is a multi-use tool. Taken to a wall, it can break it down.
A hammer can perform repetitive, recreatable tasks with relative ease, such as setting a spike or being used to build something to blueprint.
A hammer can also be used to create art, such as a statue from a block of marble with use of a chisel.
When it comes to usage of symbolism, I think Bastion really nails it.
And Bastion really hammers this point home.
You make jokes? That's my job!
Well, maybe you should do deadpan for a while.
To make it even less subtle, the hammer is the only weapon identified as the kid's lifelong friend, and is always with the kid in cutscenes, even if the player has long since left it in the armory unupgraded.
The hammer as a tool is capable of any and all of the 3 modes of grief presented by this game, serving as a very subtle shorthand by placing the choice of coping mechanism in their players' hands. They are in charge of themselves, and how they choose to wield their grief is their own.
All this culminates in a pair of player-made choices, but whereas other games would present all choices equally, letting the player pick the one which is right or best for them and then leave them with the consequences...
Cough, Deus Ex, cough.
Bastion instead leads you towards what it considers the healthiest avenue for grief.
It does this by asking the player 2 questions. Are you ready to let go? And are you ready to move on?
The first question comes in the form of choosing whether or not to abandon the battering ram and save Zulf. Bastion is literally asking the player, are you willing to put down this destructive force and forgive this person when they need you the most?
The game clearly doesn't root for you to leave Zulf behind to die. From the narrator's perspective, the game almost seems to mourn him if left behind, and rewards you emotionally if he is not.
On that same token, the game doesn't really stop you either, acknowledging possibly the most difficult thing there is about helping another person through grief. You can't.
Can we lighten the mood a little bit? This is depressing.
Yeah, that got a little too real. Here's some cat pictures.
There, that's better. Now we can handle Bastion's final movement, when it asks you its second question. Are you ready to move on?
The choice being to activate the Bastion, turn back time, restoring the world but risking the same mistakes, or to destroy the heart of the Bastion and activate the evacuation procedure to try and find a new life.
This choice is a little more transparent than the one made with Zulf, but it acts as a sort of final test for the progress the player has made in dealing with their grief.
The game openly acknowledges that turning back time won't fix any of the problems which led to the calamity, and in all likelihood it may happen again.
Choosing Zia's ending, however, contains none of these hinted drawbacks, as the player is treated to a collection of scenes in the new life of our survivors on their Bastion airship. Even Rucks ultimately doesn't seem to oppose to this idea, stating that he hadn't thought of it that way.
What really makes this choice resonate is, like so much of the game prior, Bastion does not judge you for your choice. Much like the age-old question of soft taco versus hard shell, there isn't a correct answer as much as there is an ideal one.
Soft taco, only way to go. If I wanted crispy cornflakes, I'll buy a bag of tortilla chips.
Bastion's response to the less-than-ideal choice isn't designed to feel like a punishment, but rather that the choice itself is unsatisfying.
like a crispy taco shell, splintering into 1,000 pieces. If the player chooses to play back time, they are presented a series of images of life before the calamity, some good, some bad, unlike crispy tacos, which are all bad.
However, if the player chooses to move on, they are treated to a series of images of new life abroad, exploring the world,
Pointing the player toward what the game considers a more healthy way to deal with grief. Let go when you're ready. Take care of your new self and create a new life. Or another bite of taco, whatever works.
One thing I've said repeatedly about this game in private conversations is that the kid isn't a silent protagonist. Rather, he is a quiet one. A silent protagonist is an empty shell for the player to fill, but the kid isn't that. The kid has just enough baggage, just enough background story, and just enough direction to guide the player through his grieving process in the healthiest way possible. He has a voice, just a quiet one.
But my stomach is not. Can we go now?
That's all for this week, everyone. Next time, Thomas was alone. Hey there, everybody. Run Bam Run Faster here in the editing room. On behalf of the entire Game Interrogators crew, thank you for taking the time to watch our video about Bastion. And we look forward to making many, many more about some of the most interesting games we can find. If you like this video, why don't you click that big old subscribe button to keep track of when we release more stuff. Also, check out our running Let's Play series for both Shadow of the Colossus and DuckTales Remastered. This is the part of the recording where I have to improv for like 10-15 seconds because I need a long enough outro roll, but I didn't write enough. So, 2 more seconds. Hug your mothers, kids. They love you, and they work hard.